brothers and sisters in recovery. Hello, friends in fitness. Hello, anxiety warriors, and welcome to 40,000 Steps Live. Let's get this out of the way. I'm your host, Christopher Heimerman. I am not a healthcare professional. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychiatrist or a licensed expert. What I am is a guy with 316 days of sobriety. But I had to go through treatment in order to get there, and I know how hard it was to get me there. And that brings us to the theme of tonight's episode. I can't imagine a more desperate and difficult situation than when somebody who you love is caught in the throes of addiction. And you've tried everything. The conversations are never easy. They turn ugly, and it never accomplishes anything. They are fighting tooth and nail to hold on to their addiction, and vice versa, that addiction is clinging to them as well. I've gotten a lot of messages so far this year from people who are in that spot. They're at their wits' end. They're angry. They're frustrated. They're hurt. They are beaten down. So I fast-tracked tonight's episode. Shuffled some things around, moved some things, got my guy Ron Partch to come and join us tonight. Ron owns a bunch of DUI counseling centers. He's a guy who's been there, done that, seen that, and he's going to offer some advice to folks that they can hopefully get through to the people that they love, get them the help that they need. So that's what's on tap for tonight. Lots of fun, lots of good advice. Trust me, we're going to have a good time. It is a great night for a run. This is 40,000 Steps Live. All right, folks, take a little trip with me. Let's go back to the holiday season of 2018 into 2019. I was sober for a very brief moment in time. My wife, Kayla, our daughters, who are now 7, our little twin girls, and Kayla's dad, we all went to Madison, Wisconsin for a little holiday getaway for about a week or so. And gosh, it was awesome. I was clear-headed. We'd go out to dinner, and I wouldn't even flinch when they'd order a couple of beers or something. They being, Kayla and her dad, not our daughters, of course. And here, for those of you who, can actually resist, watching the show and don't find me devastatingly handsome, I'm going to bring some photos up here. But when you're listening to the podcast, you can go ahead and check out the blogs. You're going to see some of these pictures. These are some photos from when we were up in Madison, and I was good for a moment in time. I was working out twice a day. I woke up rested in the morning in the very best mood of my life. I was sharp as a tack. I remember hitting the workout room a couple of times a day and just like destroying on the treadmill. Here's Kayla and me. This is before we went up to Madison. This was Christmas with her family. And then these next couple of pictures are from when we were at the hotel in Madison. I mean, come on. What a lucky guy he was. Look at these kids. You know how beautiful they are. That was them swimming in the pool, which was obviously their favorite part of the trip. And we went ice skating. We did lots of cool stuff. This is me and the girls in front of the Christmas tree at the Capitol. And there's Kayla's dad, and that's Anna, who he's ice skating with. So we had an awesome time. It was like the best week of my life up until that point. It was so good to be free of the clutches of addiction for a little bit. I mean, let's be honest, I wasn't out of the clutches. I was just enjoying a reprieve. The Saturday night before we left, we went to the hotel bar and I ordered a Virgin Mary, and the bartender accidentally poured vodka into it. And it was funny. I took a drink of it, and it was, it hit me, and it kind of sent me for a little spin for a minute, but I shook it off. I was still in such a good place. Dumped it out, we moved on. So we leave and we come back home, and that following Monday, we returned back to normalcy. I went to work and got back to everyday life. And of course, what I mean by everyday life was I went back to drinking every single day. As a matter of fact, that Monday after we got back, I was driving to the grocery store to pick up some beer, and it was icy. And I went to turn toward the grocery store, slid through the intersection, and smashed into the driver's side door of another vehicle. Just crushed it. To this day, I cannot believe that the driver wasn't hurt. Thank goodness. And so I stuck around, talked to the police officer, checked on the guy. It turned out he was fine. But it shook me. And I mean, that should have sent a message, right? Hey, dude, I know you were going to buy alcohol and you hit another car. So let's rethink your life choices, right? I went and I bought the beer anyway. Seriously. I mean, addiction does such crazy things to you and you just cling to it. I mean, I was shook up, so maybe it was that I wanted to numb, the fact that I was shook up or I felt like an idiot. No matter what happened, I was going to buy the beer. And I wish I didn't need to go to treatment to fix where I was, but I had to. I spent the next couple of months drinking every single day, maybe an exception here or there. Crazy, right? So anyway, finally, I get into treatment. And, I had always said that I wanted to get sober. I was stuck in a job that I hated. And if I could have gone to treatment, I would have, right? That's not entirely true, folks. That's not the whole story. Because when I tried to think about what it would be like to not have a drink, to me, that felt like a death sentence. And here's the funny thing is it kind of was because, once I gave up alcohol, it was like that old life was dead. And I had this new lease on a new life. But in that moment, man, oh my God, I couldn't possibly think about never having another beer. And I convinced myself that it was the taste. And yeah, I was a craft beer guy. I still miss the taste, but I wasn't hanging on for the taste. I was hanging on for the escape and that opportunity to numb my emotions rather than actually feel them. So, I mean, I tried a bunch of methods. I did a book called The 30-Day Sobriety Solution, which helped a bit, but it didn't stick. And I kept screwing up. And finally, I went to treatment. And that's what it took for me. Now, I said it in the intro. I've been talking to some folks this year who are in a very, very rough place. Every time that they try to get their loved one to accept a little bit of help, the conversation goes straight south. There are physical lashings out. There are awful things said. It's explosive. And here the person is trying to get them help because they're worried about them. They're upset. They want their life back too. They want things to be better, but they're scared for their loved one. They're scared for their kids in a lot of these cases. And they're scared for the perfect strangers who are driving down the road and not aware that another person on the road is completely smashed and at any moment could cause an accident, could hurt them, could hurt others, could cause any sort of damage. And so people who I know are trying to get this across to people that, gosh, it shouldn't have to be that like Hollywood rock bottom. Something horrible shouldn't have to happen for you to get help. But gosh, there's a reason why it happens so much and why people don't just walk into treatment. It's hard. And my heart hurts for the people who are stuck in this. And that is why I am bringing on Ron Partch tonight. Who is Ron? Who's Ron Partch? Everybody wants to know who Ron Partch is. Well, Ron owns 3 DUI counseling centers. I'm going to show a picture of him here with one of his star clients. Ron owns these DUI counseling centers where they do one-on-one sessions, they do group sessions. A lot of people end up with Ron because they're court-ordered, but a lot of people do walk into his office by their own volition. Here he is. There's Ron with Boston Terrier Molly. We'll have to ask him about Molly tonight. But Ron's seen some things, man. He's seen people at all sorts of different stages of addiction, and he's seen a lot of them get help. So we're going to ask him for some tips tonight. Now, before we bring in Ron, we're going to answer some questions in the next segment. I got some doozies tonight, which is awesome. If you want to send questions for us to answer live on the air, you can send them to 40,000steps@gmail.com, or you can post them down below in the comments field. But before we get to that, before we get to any of that, I want to talk about the Salvation Army because they're closing down on their campaign. They're still in the midst of their Christmas campaign. And the Salvation Army rescued so very many Christmases this year. So the red kettles aren't around anymore, but the communities that the Salvation Army serves are still more in need now than at any other time, well, in my lifetime, certainly. You can make a huge difference by going to salvationarmyusa.org and making a donation. Thanks to the generosity of millions who participated in the Angel Tree program or donated in person or online, the Salvation Army rescued Christmases for countless families in need. But like I said, the drive isn't over. The funds raised at this time of the year help the Salvation Army carry out its mission year-round. So do your part. Go to salvationarmyusa.org and make a donation today. No donation is too small, folks. Every little bit helps, right? One day at a time, one nickel at a time, it all adds up. So we're going to bring on Ron here in a little bit. But first, like I said, we've got some awesome questions that we're going to take on right now. Still time to send your questions to 40,000steps@gmail.com. In fact, if we don't get them to them tonight, we will answer them in another show. Again, live on the air. Cool, right? So let's get into those. Let's head to the next segment. This is a little something that we call I Hear You. Folks, the rules of the game are simple. When you send a question, a comment, or maybe you're celebrating a sober anniversary, anytime you send us something, you get 40,000 points in this game. Everybody who sends something in gets 40,000 points, and everybody wins because whenever we talk about addiction, mental illness, recovery, anytime that we bring this stuff into the light, everybody wins. We all get a little bit better. Taking the sledgehammer to that stigma stuff, man, bringing this stuff into the light so that we can actually get better and help people live their best lives. So all of these people I'm about to refer to are absolute champions. They win. This one actually came right out of our last show. This is from Megan. Thank you so much for writing, Megan. I love this one, and it speaks to tonight's show. She asks, if someone said you needed treatment in the depths of your addiction, would you have listened? And I can tell you that it depended on the day. I heard Kayla, my wife, when she would bring up that we needed to find a way to get me help. But you know, I'm a very self-aware person. It's just how it is. It's a case-by-case basis. So I was willing to listen to the conversation, but I wasn't willing to make a substantial change. You know, I did think that I was stuck in my job. I did think that certain things in my life were always going to be bad, and I was stuck. So I didn't feel like I could, like, you know, be out of society for a little while to go to treatment. I didn't think that was an option, which is funny because millions do it. And guess what? Now they're living their best lives. So if I thought about it that way before, I might have been more apt to do it. I did push back sometimes because A, I wanted to hold on to my addiction, and B, there's the whole pride thing, right? And you know, that's why I did try some other things. And I had some minimal success with those things, but not enough success. None of it ever stuck. So yeah, I did listen. But even though I listened, it wasn't enough. And that's where we're going to bring in Ron and find out how we can kind of get people over that hump. Thank you so much for writing, Megan. You rock. All right, this next one. This one is heavy. This is from a friend of mine in Wisconsin, and this came in during the last show. She wants to remain anonymous, and we will always honor that. Whenever you send this stuff in, folks, if you don't want your name attached to it, please let us know. Hopefully, that'll encourage you to ask questions and stuff too, knowing that your anonymity is safe with us. So this friend says, in our area, there is nowhere to go into treatment unless you have a 0 alcohol level when you start. We tried for 3 months to help a family member get therapy for severe depression and anxiety. Because he was also drinking, he couldn't get an appointment. Speaking of case-by-case basis, there are a lot of places in this country that are mental health deserts. and treatment deserts, intervention deserts. So I know that there isn't a question in this one, but I think it gives us a great opportunity to acknowledge the fact that I'm very lucky here in DeKalb, Illinois. We've got a great health department. My psychiatrist lives here. My counselor lives here. She's actually one and the same now, even more lucky that way. And, we have people here in town who do make, human services, social services a priority. And so I'm fortunate here. I know that in like southwestern Wisconsin, like if you're not in Dane County, like around Madison, it is incredibly difficult to find A, somebody who can help you, and B, somebody who can, who you can afford to see, and then C, somebody who doesn't have all these hoops that we need to jump through. How does a treatment center deny somebody to intake unless they have a 0 alcohol level? I don't get that. I flat out do not get that. When I went to treatment, there were guys who walked in there who had been drunk for days on end. And, there were guys who came in there who had no idea where they were. So one thing I urge you to do, whether you are in addiction, in the throes of it, or someone who you love, is, when you go looking for resources, talk to your doctor, talk to your GP, and they're probably going to have some recommendations for you. Talk to your insurance as well, because A, they have the list of places that you could go, and B, it's the list of places that are covered. Because like when you talk to your GP, don't hop on the phone and make an appointment with a behavioral center without making sure that it's covered, because this stuff is expensive. Sorry for the sticker shock, but treatment, counseling, a lot of the stuff can be very expensive. So make sure you check with your doctor and your insurance before you go into any sort of interventions. Folks, without further ado, I can only offer so many answers. I'm just a guy. I love doing this with you. I hope that like me being so forthcoming helps you, but I don't have all the answers. And we've got a guy here tonight who does have a lot more answers. It's Ron Partch. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him and what he does on the other side of this break. So let's head over to the guest room, shall we? Welcome back, folks. We're going to introduce Ron Partch now. He owns 3 DUI counseling centers, one in Sycamore, that's like right in my backyard, another one in Plano, and another one in Crystal Lake. In these places, he's helping people in a group setting, a one-on-one setting. They're working on tools and all sorts of ways to get better, just to get better every day, inch by inch, right? So, Ron, I couldn't be more pumped to have you on tonight. I have so many questions. We have people listening who could use a little bit of your help. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Greetings.
So I've been doing my best to help some folks who are in this pickle that I've been describing, where they can't even just bring up like, hey, honey, I found this bottle in your golf bag, this empty bottle. And the moment that they bring it up, it's World War III, man. How do they change the narrative in these conversations and get their loved ones some help?
Well, the first thing is to be careful not putting them immediately on the defensive, because we're all going to be defensive if we're defined that way or accused. Now, granted, he's going to tell her it's probably been in there 6 months and he forgot about it. That's the most common story. Or a friend threw it in there because his spouse was watching him, or so you take the defensiveness off of that first off, because there's still this stigma in society to some degree with alcoholism, drug addiction, and recovery. So
now a lot of these folks, they've tried it over and over again, and they've gotten like beaten down emotionally. They're just tired. What are some of the ways that they can approach things differently? How do you get somebody to have the conversation if you have put them on the defensive before? How do you frame it? Like, how do you bring it up?
I think if you're talking about in a family situation or friendship, I guess the first thing you do is be supportive with them and listen, ask questions, talk to them. Now, they may get defensive, and most alcoholics or drug addicts are going to get very defensive. That's one of the things we look for when you're doing an assessment. Do you get defensive when I discuss your drinking? Okay. Talk to spouses, by the way. They're usually aware of the problem 3 to 5 years before the addict themselves are. That's just a fact because they live with them and see it. And the addict has been busy coping and adjusting and learning to live with that without giving anything away, or so they think.
Oh man, I thought that I was a ninja with my drinking.
Sure.
Sure. And the sad thing is, I think for the most part I was. But Kayla would catch me. And anytime that she would, all the hairs would stand up on my arms, and like I felt like I was about, like this big.
Yeah.
But in a lot of these situations, I mean, some of these folks are storming out of the house, getting behind the wheel, and like driving nearly blackout drunk.
Yep.
I mean, what are some of those like DEFCON 4, levels? Like how do you prevent somebody from hurting others when they're in a place like that?
Well, I think, again, you try and make it so it's, they feel like there's some level of success with that treatment. You kept saying that it looks hard. It is hard. There's nothing, if people tell you it's not, as you know, they're lying to you. It's a process and it's not an event. We wish it were. We see these things all the time in the news about magical detox and, 24-hour cures that were popular a few years ago with opiate pills. That just doesn't work. So you make it realistic for them. You make it personal. There has to be a hook. If you're an author, you learn that if you're going to write a good book, as you know, you get something that gets them hooked on it and they want to keep going. People have to feel like this is possible. We get court ordered. By the way, we do DUI and behavioral health. So we deal with mental health and other substances. But we get people in that are court ordered. Now, you can say, all right, when I'm told I have to do something, guess what? I don't want to do it, right? Tell you can't speed anymore. You're probably going to go 5 miles over the limit driving home tonight. So I expect them sometimes in group to come in, and they fold their hands, put the baseball hat down, and what are you going to do for me? Because I've paid you money. There's that implied or we're paying you money. Somebody's paying you money for this. So if you make it comfortable, respect is a big thing. I think people are surprised because they've heard these horror stories of addiction centers and mental health centers, and you treat people with respect. You make it less stressful for them, so they're going to get something out of it and not be looking surreptitiously at the clock every 3 minutes, and make them feel, okay, I can relate and I can start sharing. I always tell people too, if they're looking for a therapist, give it 3 sessions. You're going to know if that's a fit or if it's not. And if it's not, go somewhere else. Ask questions. People are afraid to ask questions. Ask the therapist questions about their background, what their approach is, and you'll get a good feel for. As far as if you're a family member, again, I think you can be supportive. You can suggest things. I always encourage parents or spouses to encourage the individual to come in for an assessment, because what do they have to lose? If they don't have a problem, then they shouldn't be concerned about it. They know damn well they have a problem, so they know they have plenty to be concerned about, but they're also expecting that boot to drop on them.
All right, let's talk about the assessment, because I mean that seems like an incredible tool. Like, I know around here they can call you. But like, how about like our friends all over the map? Like, where should they go to see where they can get an assessment and find out how they can get help the best way?
You mean physically, like locations you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess because, like I said, I know around here, I could point
Yes,
somebody to you.
sure.
But what about folks who don't live around here?
Then you can Google it and look for alcohol, under alcohol, counselors, drugs. Usually all kinds of names will pop up. Um, you can ask your GPA or your general practitioner. I heard you talking about that. I find the biggest referral is word of mouth. If people feel respected and liked how they were treated, they usually will share that with their friends as well, as far as referrals and effectiveness. Yeah, Google it. You can call local AA councils. They will sometimes give you locations. Should tell you if they accept insurance, and if so, which insurance plans they have. That's a plus and a minus. Sometimes the insurance companies limit them to where they can go. But on the flip side, as you're saying, if you're doing residential, few people can afford to pay that out of pocket. So you almost need to have insurance. There is state funding and private pay. I get people into some places all the time, like Gateway, Rosecrans, Linden Oaks, for residential centers. So
Yeah, Team Gateway here, P unit for life. Yeah, that was
okay,
that was the unit that I was in,
that's a good
and
program.
it really truly is. And being there absolutely got me on the right track. And yeah, there is no silver bullet. There, like you said, there's no like short-term program that's a magic wand that's just going to fix things. And that's what you learn in treatment is that it is building a program. And you were talking before about coming from a place of compassion and support and stuff. And for me, it was like as soon as I was able to flip the mindset and realize that I wasn't running from something bad and I was going towards something good, that made all the difference in the world to me.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of people, like I was saying, when we were in that trip in Madison, like I had like the best week of my life, but I didn't get far enough away from my last drink. You know what I mean?
You were patting yourself on the back because you were clean for the weekend. And it's easier for an alcoholic to not drink than it is to have one or two drinks and stop. So people will frequently say that, well, I didn't drink for a month. Well, that's good. But what happens when you have 3 beers? And usually they can't stop. 3 equals, a blackout. So
Yeah.
because they don't know when they'll stop or how much they'll drink.
Well, and I think that's why when people get out of treatment, if you're one of those folks out there who ends up working with a loved one, they get an assessment and they get into treatment, I think we need to emphasize that even treatment in and of itself, that is not enough. I got out of treatment. I screwed up a couple more times when I got out. Finally, May 21st, 2019 is my date. And I love that date. But I mean, it's the other side of treatment. It's the support and the work that goes into it. But if you do the work, I mean, the payday is just awesome. But yeah, I mean, family members, you yourself, it's the work on the other side of treatment.
Correct. You're asking how the family do it. Again, you find the therapist. Beyond that, you help. The family should probably be involved to some degree in therapy. Now that may or may not happen or may not be needed. The therapist and the individual will figure that out. But for a long time, for years, I'm dating myself, but that's not hard to do. The individual went away to treatment and then came home and everything was, through rose-colored glasses, except he walked in the house. The old resentments were still there with the spouse. The issues that were unresolved, and now suddenly from having a husband and 4 kids, or really 5 kids, now she's got a husband and 4 kids. So the spouse should be involved in some form of family therapy. And I think beyond just the family program night where you watch a video for 45 minutes, ask questions, and then you have visiting for an hour. The family can help if they can get them into treatment, help offer rides to and from treatment. A lot of people don't have it's mind-blowing. I know they don't have licenses, so help them get to treatment. Get into the visiting time. Ask to be involved. We always ask if family want to be involved with the individuals counseling, whether it's in individuals, groups, family session. They should get rid of substances in the home. A lot of times people don't think about that, but it will help with the temptation level if they're not going out to the refrigerator to get a can of ginger ale and there's a 12-pack of Coors Light in there.
Well,
Maybe
I mean, you said it. If you're wired like me, you're not gonna go and sneak downstairs and have a beer and feel satisfied. I mean, it can be over that fast.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then have some kind of a family plan, even if it's as simple as starting the day with breakfast or ending the day with dinner, however that works in that family, to have some kind of consistency start to develop and a routine. And as well, helping them, like you said, beyond treatment. Yeah, are they in a recovery program? Are they in a non-traditional recovery program? Are they involved with church, or is it family and friends that keep that individual sober? Something has to be there to help support them. You've taken away a huge hole that they were filling with booze. And so what's going to fill that? An AA meeting may fill a small teeny piece of that, but that's not going to do it in and of itself. What do they like to do? And there's going to be a period of time before they really get involved with that. There's that anhedonia, they call it, when they've stopped drinking and life seems no fun. That's true with a lot of things when we get out of it, smoking or whatever. It's like, oh, life's going to be no fun anymore. I don't have. And so it takes, the brain a while to refill those synapses, and all the receptors we were using drugs and alcohol to fill with. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean, then there's also the aspect of if you're not numbing your emotions, you feel all of them. They all burn so bright.
Absolutely.
So I love the fact that you're talking about what do they like to do. It's not going to be a matter of you're going to go to church on Sunday, you're going to go to a meeting every day of the week, you're going to do these things, and we're going to straighten you out. It's a matter of, okay, let's figure out things that you love that we can make more of your regular routine. I love that.
Absolutely.
I mean, why would we force it's like forcing the square block into the cylindrical space.
If it doesn't fill a need, they're not going to do it. It's like going to a 12-step. For a third of the people, it's a fit and it works well and they run with it. Some people don't go to that, so then you find other alternative programs for them. And the same thing with us. It's got to fit to make life interesting and have meaning to them.
Yeah, I mean, AA works for millions and millions of people.
Yes, it's the most successful program to date.
And for good reason. I personally preferred SMART. I liked the fact that it was more forum-based. So there was immediate tools and sort of discussions on things.
Yes.
But I mean, they both have their own merits. It's a matter of what fits for you. How do you thrive best? What gives you the best results?
You ever talk in this show, I'm sorry to interrupt, about different recovery groups? And we could go on a different show on about that. Women for Sobriety.
We can do that another time. Absolutely.
Yeah, secular organization for sobriety. My favorite is Refuge Recovery, the Buddhist-based program. But I'm sorry, I diverted here. So.
No, you had me at Buddhist. I'm very big into mindfulness and meditation. So my ears perked up when you said that. Share, do me a favor and email me some of that stuff so I can share it on my page, please.
I will.
One thing that you run into in treatment and that you see in AA is you get sort of the scared straight effect. Guys will come in and they'll talk in treatment and they'll share their horror stories of how they crashed and burned and maybe literally burned down their house, ended up in prison and stuff. I mean, obviously, again, this is a case-by-case basis. That works well for some people, might not work well for others. And I think that a lot of the people watching this show are probably maybe drawn to me because I am more of a glass half full guy. I thrive best when I'm going towards something good rather than running from something bad.
Okay.
But I have to think that, you've seen enough that you probably have a couple of horror stories. Am I right in terms of like way that people's lives have fallen apart? I mean, how do you roll with that, and how do you help people when they've like hit rock bottom? You know, what are some of the things that come to mind?
Interesting word, rock bottom. You hear people say, I think he hasn't hit bottom yet. He's not ready to quit, or she hasn't hit a bottom. Let her go. The problem with hitting a bottom is the next bottom may be lower. I've seen the Jellinek chart, it goes down and then comes up for the deterioration and then the recovery part of it, versus the line going down and then it does a loop where they're getting into recovery and then they relapse. And the next bottom could be lower. The first bottom could be, loss of job. The second bottom might be loss of spouse and kids. The third bottom might be loss of home and every bottom can be worse. I'm not a big fan of just saying, well, somebody's got to hit bottom. I think it's interjecting or doing an intervention at some point before they reach that point. Research has also shown the scared straight for some people doesn't work. You have the green people, they're never going to do anything. And you know what I mean? They're not going to fall into that. There's the red group that have already fallen into it. And then you have the fence sitters, which is what some of those programs aim for. Well, the green kids, for lack of a better word, that reinforces for them. The fence sitters are going to say, well, that looks pretty exciting. Maybe, and look at, he survived. Maybe I will too. I worked at a treatment center where we used to bring in speakers and discover that was part of the unintended consequence. They were watching these sports heroes and who were healthy and standing alive. And it's like, well, he did it, so maybe I could. And, that's a tough one. They call that tough love, with parents always threatening to throw kids out. And of course, that's every parent's worst nightmare, that something will happen or they'll get the call at 3 a.m. from the sheriff. And it has to be something that's individualized for them, that is manageable. You can certainly be driven to the end of your rope, but I think you can stop a lot. Yeah, I think you can put limits on the behaviors. That doesn't mean you stop loving the individual.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I want to talk about sort of the machinations of a couple of these things and how they logistically work. Because you brought up the word intervention.
Yes.
And tell me if I'm way out of bounds on this. Somebody who I've been talking with is just he's at the end of his rope.
Okay.
He feels in danger. There's issues with family and kids, and he knows that there's a lot of ways that this thing could go further sideways fast. And I mean, would it make any sense for him to reach out to, say, a professional interventionist, somebody who's seen like any and every scenario, so that they could give him some advice? Because
yes,
I think a lot of people are worried that there's no way an intervention will work. This person will never go for that.
I think that's an excellent idea to look at and to approach. You have to be aware, first of all, an intervention may not work. I've done them. It's been a couple of years since the last time. It was a 5-hour ordeal. I was fairly certain wasn't going to be successful, and in the end, it was. I guess with time and family, and so yeah, you can stage an intervention. You should have somebody that's a professional leading it, or at least being an objective participant of that group. You want to bring different people together. You want to bring friends, family, spouse, if possible, an employer, or somebody that carries some weight, preferably somebody they like, or that would make it work. You have to learn about the disease yourself if you're going to be doing that. The mistake people make in interventions is getting accusatory, which again puts them on the defensive. That's going to go nowhere. They're going to get up and walk out. Rather than telling them what they did when they were under the influence, tell them how that made you feel emotionally involved. And again, I think sometimes the spouse, we're thinking of the spouse, often needs therapy themselves. Sometimes they can become more ill than the individual themselves. You offer to help them, support them, find options for them. You find a place, preferably before you set this up, or the expert you brought in is doing that. Plan for them, If the employer's involved, time off from work, that it's going to be covered. I don't know if I'm answering all that question for you or not.
No, absolutely. Now let's get into that. You said it, that interventions are also not fail proof. In some cases they're not going to work. I mean, help me through this, because I think that I know the answer to this. Unless there is a court order of some sort, like in the state of Illinois, people cannot be committed into treatment involuntarily. Am I right?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
How, in what sort of scenarios would it reach that point? Is that one of those cases where we do need the Hollywood crash and burn, where somebody gets arrested and then there's a court order for somebody to go into treatment? Is that what we're down to at that point?
Some people have done that. I had a guy in treatment tell me one time, he said, my wife, we got into a fight. He said I would provoke that, so I had a reason to leave the house and finish drinking at the bar. She picked up the phone, called the police. He got arrested for DUI. Now, most people would look at it and say, whoa, are they together? And he looked at me, he said, I thank her for that, because she, in her own way, she did an intervention with me. And if she hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten the help, because he came in to inpatient, and then he came into our program. We followed up with outpatient for him. Not that all DUI people are alcoholic. I want to add a caveat to that. But in his case, he clearly was. He finally accepted there was a problem. Part of the process of the disease is admitting it. That's the first step. Accepting it, because that's different from admitting it. We can admit lots of things, then it goes no further, as you were talking about. Accepting it and then addressing it, usually through treatment. It could be a number of things, and then you've resolved it. Now, is it cured? No, as you know, addiction's never cured, but you can put it in remission.
Mm-hmm. So this woman, she kind of found a loophole. she found a way to she found a way to force the issue.
She did. Now, that was a nice way to explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I know I was there with somebody who I cared about at one point, where me and some other people, we were thinking, okay, how can we get this person arrested so that we can force the issue? Yeah. I mean, that's what we were down to. And honestly, to this day, I don't know how he is. And it looms over me, because I don't know what sort of a place that person's in. So
sure.
I don't know. It's interesting. I know that we're going to be running out of time soon. You mentioned that not only is this a DUI counseling center that you run, but it's the behavioral health as well. When I was in treatment, I was so pumped to hear somebody say to me out loud that I had a dual diagnosis.
Okay.
Because I always knew that I had depression and anxiety, and I was coming to terms with the fact that I was an alcoholic. But something about hearing somebody else say it out loud, that, and even reading it in the big book too, that to a certain extent, my alcoholism, me drinking every day, to a certain was a symptom of my mental illness. So how do we? What's the best way? I was talking with Manda, but before you hopped on with us,
yes.
What are some of the best ways that we can address this mental illness stuff? Because so often if it's not the root of the problem, it's certainly walking hand in hand along with the alcoholism.
And that's a good way you put it. It can be a symptom. It can be primary or secondary. 50 or 60% of addicts, I don't have the number in front of me, experience a co-occurring disorder. And of course, that's always on a continuum from low to medium to high. But there's usually anxiety and depression anxiety is the number one mental health issue you see with it. Lots of kids discover marijuana calms their anxiety, and so they start using. Lots of people learn alcohol is a good coping mechanism with stress and anxiety, and they start drinking. Which then alcohol, then they've added the dual problem. Now it's the anxiety and you have the alcohol problem, because that's a short-term fix that never works for them and develops its own problem. So you treat them concurrently. You address both of them. You look at, and certainly there's referrals involved with some of that, getting them to a psychiatrist for a full diagnosis on that. And for some, it's medication. Some people don't want to take medications. Again, to me, it's quality of life. Can you live and learn behavioral techniques? Great. If you can't, some people are going to need some intervention, either for a short term or a long term with the medication. But I'm not big on prescribing. I think we've overprescribed in this society, as the pain epidemic has shown us with opiates and stuff. And sometimes people get thrown into a garbage can just, with the personality disorders, or it's just use that and throw them a pill. But and I always recommend second opinions if they're really not sure about that on the anxiety or depressive disorders. But it's nothing to be ashamed of. Again, it's quality of life. Are you dealing with it? Are you okay? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And really, you just said it's nothing to be ashamed of. And then we get into that stigma stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think that's the one of the biggest things that's holding us back, is that people don't want to talk about it. They feel shame, that they drink too much. They feel shame that they're sad and they don't know why, or that they have racing thoughts. They feel shame about all this stuff because society has a way of saying that makes them weak or flawed, yes, or unfixable. Yes. So let's get into this for a moment. And because if somebody screws up and they end up in the criminal justice system, if they end up in the court system, then things go from bad to worse fast. Yep. If they sit in jail overnight, they lose their job, it gets worse fast. So whether we're talking about the stigma, or if we're talking about the fact that we should be getting people treatment rather than putting them in jail, how much of this is sort of the overhauling of how society looks at these problems? Is it just a matter of, do we just need to make more noise in order to make sure that people know that these are problems?
I think so. I think, if you talk to DLC, Department of Corrections, they will tell you over 50, 60, 70% of their population were under the influence, usually alcohol, when they committed offenses. No disorder has the involvement with the legal system like addiction does. And I think there's, that works both sides. The sentencing, which is being addressed, they're talking about that. I know they're doing things locally and nationally with, different things, bail reform, and also making the public aware of that. It's not, we make DUI, and I'm not taking a position one or the other, but we make it a very shaming thing when they get their name thrown in the paper. Mm-hmm. And some cities will even put where the incident occurred. I've heard some cities put where they live. I'm not suggesting we don't treat it what it is, which is a crime, but I think instead of dealing with highlighting the negative, you start doing the positive. When they come to me, for example, from DUI, I'm aware they've been court ordered there. So it's like, how are we going to get them to want to deal with this and do this for themselves, not just for the court? I tell them that's your first treatment plan, is the court order you came in with. We need to do those things, but what are you going to add to that for yourself so you're getting something out of this? And generally, by the third or fourth session, they're starting to buy into it because they feel comfortable, they feel accepted. They've told me that they don't feel judged. They don't like labels. Addicts are the most creative, and I'm at a loss for words, but they're most creative and inventive individuals I've ever met. And I mean that. When I worked at an inpatient treatment center, some of the artistic things we'd see the adults and adolescents do would blow you away. And I always think if security and some of these firms were smart, when people got out of DOC, they would hire some of these folks for their expertise. Instead, we throw a felony on them and make it now harder for them to find a job. So I think it is both sides, making some changes in the law where it's applicable, and as a society, stop all this stigma and moral judgment we do with addicts and recovery. Treatment does work.
Well, now you mentioned that a lot of people end up walking through your door because of court orders, but there's a lot of people who walk through under their own volition as well.
Yes.
No matter what reason they end up in front of you. Let's end this on a high note and tell me about all the guys who have walked through that door an absolute dumpster fire and now today they're living their best life. What's it like for you to see people make the incremental change and to just see that transformation and see somebody come back alive again?
That's a really nice feeling, and you need that every few weeks to see somebody come back and thank you or say something you didn't think meant anything at the time as you worked with them that said, that really stuck. I've never forgotten that, or you saw me in a different way. You know what I'm saying? They felt like human beings and of value and worth, and they realized there was a life possible and they could have fun and enjoy life without, and quality, because there's so much to people. You know, there's families, and for some children and spouses and co-workers, and it's a good feeling.
I mean, maybe to use a journalism term, maybe we just buried the lead, because I think that in and of itself is the best way to get people some help, is to show them, and hey, that's why I do this, man. That's why I put myself out there, because if we can show the proof in the pudding that life can be really good.
Yes, if they learn nothing else, is that they're no better and no worse than I am, and vice versa. That everyone is one and the same. We make mistakes, you learn from it, and you're a better human being as a result of it. Some people need to make the mistake, or for whatever reason, will make the mistake 2 or 3 times, but sooner or later they get there. And I always look at them and say, you're the light bulb that suddenly started working before we threw it away. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that makes them look at it a different way.
Well, Ron, you're an absolute treasure, and I'm so glad to have you here on this show and in the community as well.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, we're going to have you on again. You mentioned it, that there's a lot of other programs apart from AA and even SMART, things we haven't even talked about yet.
Yes.
So send me that stuff. I will do my homework. I'll do my homework on it, so I'll have some intelligent questions for you when we have you on in a couple of months. All right?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ron. Woo, that was awesome. I think you might need to save this video and keep all of this handy, because my goodness, that was a lot of amazing information packed into a half-an-hour interview. And I knew it would be. This is why we fast-tracked Ron, because Ron is awesome, and because a lot of people need that information right now. It's so much good advice. But I definitely love the fact that we ended up at the end where I always try to begin, and that's a place of seeking the positive rather than letting ourselves live in the negative. Who likes to feel bad? I mean, I know that there's a certain amount of thumbing of the bruise that makes people happy. Even, like, I love sad bastard music. I love things that make me sad. Sad movies, sad music. But ultimately, we as humans want to be happy. So let's focus on working toward things that make us feel good and make us happy, rather than constantly trying to run away from something that's like lurking around the corner, whether it be addiction to alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be any sort of ways that we limit ourselves, right? I see the adulation pouring in for Ron. My goodness. I didn't throw him a softball either. We threw some hard ones at him, and he was knocking the ball all over the yard. I think Ron hit for the cycle tonight. I think that's also enough baseball analogies. Guys, it's been great to have you here. Next week, we are going to have on a very good friend of mine, Pastor Wesley Dixon. He is a Methodist pastor who actually got me over the hump to do this stuff. I was getting cold feet. I wasn't going to write the book. I wasn't going to do this show because I was scared. And Wes, man, he got me here, and he's going to be with us next week. So, folks, as always, it's a scary world out there, right? Even though things might be falling apart outside of here, in here, we are always coming together. Love you, folks. Talk to you soon.